It's a critical step for any emerging business to have access to funds that they can use to make sure that their business is able to succeed into the future. Hi, my name's Rachel Hare and I'm the founder and owner of BlazeBusiness&Legal. I've been advising startups for over 23 years now as both a legal advisor and a business advisor. So I cover both sides of the field. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice by any means, but I do want to give you a broad overview of the different types of startup funding so that you can make your own decisions and get more information with a better understanding of how these startup funding mechanisms work. You may be lucky and you may already have the funds available to put into the business or loan to the business to ensure your startup has the best chance possible. However, if you don't have the funds readily available, or if your startup is a tech startup or something that needs a significant amount of initial capital to be able to progress beyond prototypes, beyond its initial concept stages, beyond the idea and the dream, then you're going to need startup funding. When you're going for startup funding, there are a lot of other factors you need to consider what stage your business is at. You need to consider whether you're right on the ground in startup, and you need to convince someone of the vision behind your business and your own ability to carry out that vision. Or whether you've been going on in business for 1 or 2 years, you've got a steady track record behind you, and now you want to scale and take your growth to the next level, and therefore you require additional funding to do so. There's a lot of reasons why you would take out this funding, and it's important that you really carefully think through the ramifications of doing so before you take any action. After you've made the decision to get startup funding or to apply for startup funding, it's really important to make sure that you're fully prepared for any investment or loan requirements that you're going to need to fulfill. Having a business plan is absolutely essential. And you can find on my website a link to a template business plan, which I often recommend that my clients use when they set up a business, through the ramifications of doing so before you take any action. Let's start by exploring the different type of funding that is available for startups. I've already mentioned that you may put in your own money and you may use that to actually build up the startup as you go along. We refer to this as private investment when you are going to be using those funds with an initial capital outlay. When you provide a larger sum of money to your business, perhaps as a one-off or perhaps as a few smaller ongoing amounts, we often refer to this as private investment. Sometimes it's the case that you're intending to repay the money as your business takes off. Other times it's a investment by yourself in the business with no intention for a repayment. The other way you can use to make sure that your business is able to start and begin operating and potentially make a profit is called bootstrapping. And it's a bit of a funny name, but it comes from the saying of you hold yourself up by your bootstraps. And what that basically means is that you start your business off the smell of an oily rag. So your startup is just given enough money to get it going, and then you build up your services or you build up your products from there, often with smaller amounts given in by yourself from your bank account if needed as you go along. Not funding your own business, however, you're going to need to reach out to other stakeholders to get that funding in somehow. There's a few different ways you can do this. You may decide to seek seed funding or funding by angel investors, which is often the very, very early stages of funding when you're still running on a concept or an idea or a prototype for your startup and you haven't yet actually implemented it in practice. Often those seed funders and the angel investors are more willing to take a chance at the start based on your vision and your overall plan for the business, sometimes based on your own skills and your own personality and charisma as well. That's a very important fact to keep in mind. Otherwise, you may wish to approach the larger lenders and seek a formal business loan for you to start up your business. A number of the big lenders around the world have startup programs where they actually encourage people who want to start a business to take out a loan with them and begin their business journey. Obviously, it's up to you to compare interest rates and compare fees, and compare exit penalties or early payoff abilities, and make sure that any loan is right for you. There are also businesses who sometimes provide higher interest rate, shorter term loans, which some startup providers may take or look at as an interim measure or as a means to raise cash quickly right at the start. I don't necessarily recommend that for you if you're starting your business with the intention for it to be a longer term prospect. And there are very many cons to that sort of approach, but I mention it to be thorough and to say that sometimes startup founders do take that option. There are also other types of startup funding, and some of these are a little bit more out of the box. So these days you can actually have crowdfunding where you might go out to the public and perhaps run a campaign to raise money to allow you to do certain things with your startup. This may be a good idea if your startup is based around a particular environmental purpose or charitable purpose, something that will appeal to a large number of members of the public who will then effectively donate relatively small amounts of money to invest in your startup. Crowdfunding is a form of startup funding which has more recently become common. If you've got a particular backing of an idea or a concept or a social innovation behind your business, crowdfunding may be more attractive, where you can run a social media campaign and you can actively seek investment by the public in your business. There are two different types of crowdfunding. One where members of the public essentially make a donation and they give you money to contribute to your business. The other one is where they then become investors in the same proportion to which they donated money to your campaign. So again, there's a lot of intricacies you need to think about as you're deciding which form of crowdfunding you're going to use, if that's the type of approach you want to take. Venture capital is another way of funding your startup. That's where venture capitalists who invest in other businesses will provide startup funds to your business because they believe in the idea or they believe that it's likely to be very profitable. A venture capitalist will take an equity stake in your business, and it's something to keep in mind when you're actually considering whether you take venture capital or whether you take out a loan, is whether you can retain ownership rights and control over the business that you'll eventually be starting up and running. You can also seek out government grants for your business. It's very important that you make sure you meet the essential requirements of a government grant before you apply for it. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time and effort in doing so, because government will not allow you to proceed or progress through the government grant process unless you tick all the boxes. So if you are lucky enough to find a government grant that does apply to your business, and that's a big if, because you do need to make sure that the grant that's being asked for is actually applicable to you and what you're planning to do with your startup. If the government grant is applicable, you then need to meet all the essential requirements, you need to apply to the due date, and you then need to make sure you tick all the boxes as you go along in your application form. So there's quite a few criteria you need to meet in order to make sure that you're able to get awarded the government funding. Remember that there are pros and cons for each method of startup funding. And what I've given you today is really a broad overview of the different types. I haven't dived into depth in all of the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages. And that's something you really need to discuss with your advisors to make sure it applies for your specific startup, the purpose you want to use your startup for, and for the particular requirements that your startup will have for that funding as you go along. It's also important to make sure that any startup funding you take on and the conditions around that startup funding align with your own business goals and objectives. And one of the things that you can do is lay this out in a business plan and make sure that you've properly and carefully documented all of the different things you need to consider before you actually make that decision to go and get a particular type of startup funding. One of the best things about a business plan is that it helps you to demonstrate your own knowledge and understanding of the market, your business, its prospects into the future, its finances, its operations, and all the other things that lenders and investors are going to want to know about your business. That's why I really recommend business plans for all of my clients who are startups or even who haven't had a business plan before, because it helps you get out of your mind and put on paper all of the different things that perhaps other people don't necessarily know about the business. They're in your mind, you're the founder, you understand how your business works, but sometimes you just have that little bit of difficulty conveying that to other people. That's what your business plan is for, and so it's a critical document for you to put in place and keep regularly updated as you go along. And trust me on this one, any loan provider or investor is going to require your business plan before they lend you or give you any money. Remember that securing funding is also about building relationships. So if you're a startup founder and you're looking to make inroads into the industry, you're not quite sure yet what type of startup funding you may need, or you're not having as much luck as you may have wished with obtaining that money from startup funders, you could try networking and try making contacts within the industry who may be able to help. LinkedIn is a fantastic way of networking and building relationships with people who you may not actually meet in person, but who may be able to understand your vision and want to help you to promote it. Securing funding is a complex process, but it is manageable. Startup founders do it all the time, and as long as you understand the basics and as long as you put in place the key building blocks in your business, in your startup, to help you succeed in obtaining that funding, you'll be fine. With the right approach and the right preparation, you can find the startup funding that works for you. And the legal side in me, I've got to put my legal hat on for a second and remind you to make sure you document carefully any funding arrangement you enter into. Even if you're just borrowing money from your uncle, you must put it in writing and you must have it signed so that you have a record down the track if there's any dispute. For lending providers, for angel investors, for anyone else who is coming into your business, taking a share in your equity, giving you a loan on certain terms and conditions, make sure that is properly documented and that you read and understand it before you sign it. That one's particularly important if you're signing documents given to you by larger lenders, which have many, many hundreds of pages. You still need to read them and understand them. So a lot for you to think about there. Make sure you read my ultimate guide to startup funding. It's on my website, BlazeBusiness&Legal, and there will be a huge amount of information in there for you to read and have a think about. And you can reach out at any time and contact me. I'm more than happy to discuss.